Okay, hello everybody. I hope you can hear me. So you are joining us today for a writing skills webinar entitled SEO, Title, Abstract and Keywords and How to Position Your Article for Success. So before I move on to the body of the webinar, I'm just going to get through some housekeeping and introduce the lovely providers of this webinar series. So the Regional Studies Association is the global and interdisciplinary network for urban and regional research, development and policy. So I hope you're all members, but if you're not, it might be of interest for you to find out that the RSA supports members with research, funding schemes, networking and publishing opportunities, and spaces to grow research and their careers. As a response to the recent global crisis, the RSA board put in place initiatives to support its members and the wider community, such as this professional webinar series and the Regions and Cities Industry webinar series. And you can find more details on both of those initiatives on the RSA website. There's also an app called the RSA Hub, which will enable you to network and attend virtual events throughout the year. So please do check those out. So for some housekeeping information, this webinar will be recorded and will be available on the RSA Lounge. So that's just something to be aware of. We will start with an introductory presentation and then two separate presentations. If you could pop questions into the chat and we will come back to those at the end. And if you wish to tweet, you can use the hashtag RSA webinar. Okay, so I think we're ready to go.
Okay, so thank you everyone for taking the time to join us. Today's writing skills webinar is going to cover how, as authors, you can best position your article to maximise discoverability and allow readers to find your research. My name is Sarah Bird and I'm the Portfolio Manager at Routledge, responsible for the Geography and Regional Studies titles. You'll also be hearing from two very experienced journal editors who can offer invaluable insights. Kevin Ward is a Professor of Human Geography and Director of the Manchester Urban Institute at the University of Manchester. He's also the current Editor-in-Chief of the journal Urban Geography. Alan Liu is Professor Emeritus in the Department of Geography, Planning and Recreation at Northern Arizona University. He founded and has been the long-serving Editor-in-Chief of the journal Tourism Geographies. So, what do we intend for you to get from this session? We want to help you to understand what search engine optimization is and why it's important. We want to give you tips on writing titles, abstracts and keywords to maximise discoverability online once published. And we want to provide a space for you to ask questions and get feedback. So to start with a bit of background. Why do we need to discuss research impact? There are approximately 33,000 active English language peer-reviewed journals. These journals are publishing over 3 million articles per year. These publications support the research output of between 7 and 8 million researchers, depending on definition. And these numbers are growing every year. One place to begin is search engine optimization, or SEO. Search engine optimization is the process of using digital signposts to aid discoverability. So, what are digital signposts? And why does search engine optimization matter? SEO is the practice of improving a website so that its contents rank higher in search engine results. And as strange as it might seem, one day your article will become a web page. Why is that important? Well, 50% of all the readership on our platform now originates from search engine queries. Google and other search engines prioritize content that they see as interesting, high quality, and relevant, displaying such content higher up in search results. When you're looking for something online, how often do you go beyond page 1 to find the answer? So what does this mean for researchers? Ranking high in search engine results is key to ensuring the right readers discover published research. The higher the ranking of your article, the more potential for people to discover, read, and ultimately cite your research. There are things a good publisher will do to make their platform and web pages more discoverable, searchable, and ultimately ensure research articles rank higher in Google and other search engine results. But here's what you can do as authors. On the screen are 6 tips for authors to follow, and it all begins with identifying keywords. This is a crucial first step. Keywords form part of the metadata of your article and allow it to be discovered by web searches. Think of keywords as the building blocks of your own search engine optimization. Consider what search terms someone would use to find your article. Google Trend can help you identify how many times keywords and phrases are searched for. Article title. The title needs to be descriptive and should contain a key phrase related to your topic. Google Scholar considers the length of a title, so it helps to put your keywords within the first 65 characters. Abstract. Similar to titles, it's important to also include keywords and phrases in the abstract. Given there are more characters available here, it's also worth bringing in synonyms too. You can maximise the chances of a reader discovering your paper by keyword if you put these in the first 230 characters. Headings. Search engines will use headings within an article to index the structure and content of the paper. Include your article keywords wherever you possibly can. Inbound links. Once an article is published, the more places an author promotes it, the better. Links on web pages, blogs, social media, etc. are all indexed by search engines and help to boost an article's position in search rankings. Citations. Search engines add a lot of weight to article citations. Adding a citation and a link to previously published articles can boost the ranking for those papers and for the new paper being published. So that's a brief introduction to search engine optimization, why it's important, and what you can do as authors to improve the discoverability of your article using SEO. Before I hand over to our editors, I'd like to highlight a couple of resources that you can explore for more information, tips, and guidance. The links are on the screen now, but I can put these back up at the end and circulate following the session. So we've developed 2 12-week learning programs for researchers, one designed specifically for early career researchers. Both programs are available at howresearchers.com. Additionally, our Author Services website offers support, guidance, and tips on copyright, ethics, choosing a journal, peer review, promoting your research, and much more. These are free resources that I would encourage you to take a look at when you come to writing and submitting your papers.
Okay, so I hope that provided a bit of background, a little bit of context, and also explained search engine optimization. So we're now going to hand over to Kevin Ward, and Kevin's going to give us an overview of titles and abstracts to start with. Hello, Kevin.
Hello there.
I will pass over to Kevin now. Do remember to put your questions in the question and answer box.
So thanks, Sarah, and hello all from sunny Manchester in the northwest of England. It's nice to see the chat function buzzing away with hellos from all around the globe. Let me just sort myself out. Okay, so I'm going to offer a few thoughts that pick up on some of the useful tips that Sarah provided. And I'm doing this both as an author over the last 25 years, so somebody who has spent time wondering and thinking a bit about titles and abstracts, a reviewer, so someone who's done a lot of reviewing of journals across geography, planning, sociology, urban studies, but then for the last decade or so as a frontline editor and then an editor-in-chief for urban geography. So the frontline editor, urban geography, is the person who basically deals with authors, processes the papers, sorts out reviewers. Editor-in-chief steps back from the specifics and kind of has strategic oversight. So I've got a number of years of experience as an author, as a reviewer, and as an editor. So I thought it would be useful just to share a few thoughts about titles and abstracts in particular. So in terms of titles, and again, these are going to pick up on some of the things that Sarah said. So one of the things, I guess, is to think about your title length and punctuation. So I would always ask authors to think about shorter, to the point, titles that grab attention. You'd be amazed at how long some of the titles are of the papers that we receive at Urban Geography, at least the first iteration. Of course, if you submit a paper and it goes through review before it comes out, we'll help you or support you in maybe tweaking your title and thinking about it. But we do receive sometimes titles that run into 3 or 4 lines. Now, clearly, that is not a way of communicating your ideas in a way that would both be attractive to other authors, reviewers, people who might want to cite your piece of work. So as Sarah sort of said, start with a set of keywords and play around with how you arrange them. So think a bit about what it is you're trying to convey in your piece. Writing a title, I guess sometimes when I speak to authors, sometimes they think about writing a title as a linear process, i.e. you start with one word and you write it as it appears on the page. That's not the case. I always think about writing a title as sort of informed through a series of smaller circular feedback loops. So in a sense, you put things in, you take things out, you move words around, and you're playful and creative. It's a creative process, if you like, trying to convey to a reader and someone who you're trying to draw in and get interested in your work, what it is you're trying to get across in a title, in a short, punchy title. I would say look at other titles in your field. Let me just move this. That's better. So again, all of us are seeking, by writing an academic journal article, to insert ourselves into a wider set of papers, a wider set of book chapters, a wider intellectual field. So look at those titles, learn from them. Are there particular concepts or ideas that you want to engage with that you think might be useful to drop a name in your piece? Methodologically, are you thinking you're making a contribution through your particular paper, and do you want to have that method included in the title? Or empirically, there are reasons why you may or you may not want to include, in my case, a particular city or country in the title of your piece of work. Avoid phrasing or wording that might date your work. So again, think carefully about how your paper will stand the test of time. So if there's a reason why you're including a period of time, a date, for example, in your paper, be very clear about what work that will do for you immediately, in the shorter term, but also in the longer term. Imagine the audience for your title. I guess when I receive papers in the journal, and the ones that are very long, 3 or 4 lines, it's clear that in a sense that title has been written for the author themselves. Now it might be literally that's what the paper is about, but that's different from titling the paper in a way that will reach out and engage with audiences. So the spoiler alert is that the title is not for you as the author or authors. It's for, okay, the audience that is yet to be, but you want to construct for your work. So think about it in those terms. Who do you imagine as the target audience for your work, your particular paper, and title your work accordingly? Use words that leave readers wanting to know more. So again, Sarah made the point about using various techniques around Google to see what kind of keywords are attractive or are generating attention or are being picked up in your particular field. Think a bit about how certain words would stimulate readers' interest. Because as an editor of a journal, clearly citations are very, very important, but ultimately authors and editors want their work to be read. I want work in urban geography to shape the future of the field of urban geography. So I want to publish the material that people are going to pick up and use. Finish the title after you finish the abstract and the paper, but start it before you finish the abstract and the paper and return to it regularly. That might sound a bit odd. It's all very iterative, I guess, is the take-home point for titles. That is, there's a constant conversation between the paper, the abstract, and the title. And you can move around. They're all three are moving pieces until you settle and submit your work. So think about those three in conversation and tweak them and move them, manipulate them. And it's not uncommon for papers that get accepted into urban geography or go through the review process and get revisions and then get accepted at the title to evolve over the set of revisions. So don't expect that, I guess, when you submit your papers, that the title you start with may not be the title of the paper you end up publishing. Let's turn to abstracts. And again, it's similar in terms of, I would say, the take-home messages that you might want to think about. So again, start the abstract before you finish the paper, write the abstract as you write the paper, and only complete the abstract once you've completed the paper. Sometimes I get the sense, and I know this is the case because I speak to authors, that they write abstracts and then they try and write the paper to the abstract. That might work for some people. Other people, I think, finish the paper and then try and shoehorn the abstract in. And I would say, again, it's a dialogue, a conversation between title, abstract, and paper. Keep sentences, again, short and punchy. I mean, this is such a general thing I would say about academic writing, style-wise. You know, let's not have sentences that are long over multiple lines, particularly an abstract, which are trying to grab people's attention. You're trying to pull them in. And then either start what I'll get into the techniques for writing, whether it's I said this is a technique that people use for papers as well as abstracts, but either start wide and narrow or start narrow and go wide. So again, if you're thinking about submitting to urban geography, or most, I would say, good quality geography planning, regional studies type journals, look across the abstracts of the papers they publish, and again, look to learn from them. Again, the two kind of classics are, one starts very wide, so there's a kind of big context, and then you narrow down to your particular contribution. Another way of starting an abstract is to be quite specific, maybe a vignette, something small over a couple of lines, that then weaves out. So you start telling the reader the case study, and then you say, what is it a case study of, or vice versa? What's the big thing you're interested in? And then work out how you situate your case study. Oh, that's it. I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. That was really interesting and good points about the whole process being iterative. So next we have Alan Liu. Alan will be speaking to us on what editors want and some best practice guidelines. We're starting to see some questions in the Q&A box, so please do continue popping those in there and we will come back to those in the discussion at the end. Alan.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Let me get my PowerPoint up here. Okay, so I started Tourism Geographies. First issue was published in 1999, so I've been doing this for like over 20 years. And there we go. And all across, sorry, over that time, I've developed quite a few pet peeves about titles and abstracts, which I have written up. And so I'm giving you this link here to tgjournal.com writing-tips. There's a number of articles there that I've written, help to tips my perspective as a editor-in-chief for over 20 years. The ones in particular that I want to point out is how to title your journal, rules and tips, and how to write an abstract for tourism geography. So this is my take on what is a really good abstract. And then the last one is something I just wrote recently, 5 fantastic tools to find mistakes in your writing, which includes a readability check, which Kevin just mentioned, about the need to have short and punchy sentences. And so I would highly recommend that you use that readability check to run your abstract through, maybe not your full paper, because I don't know, academics like to show off how long their sentences can be, it seems. And some academics are impressed by that. But for the abstract, it's probably really good to have a very readable abstract. And then there's grammar checkers in there, and then there's an SEO title analyzer, which I'm going to share with you. For what it's worth, I have an example of that. Also, I've done a lot of presentations on how to write for high impact journals, mostly in Asia, which is where I do a lot of my research and a lot of traveling. And you can download those at alanlu.com/presentations. So some resources for you. So what do journal editors want? Well, journal editors want articles that will increase their journal's impact factor. What that means is articles that are going to be cited. Read, yeah, that's really nice. But the most important thing in this game that we play as editors is being cited. And that's also what authors want, because that's what's going to improve your ranking, your opportunities for promotion and tenure at your universities. And so really, in many ways, the title and the abstract are the best way to get cited. Well, maybe the best way. Obviously, the paper itself is important. The paper itself is probably the most important thing, but nobody's gonna, well, not very many people are going to read it if they don't get caught by your title and your abstract. So I argue that the title is probably the most important thing that you have in order to catch people, in order to get them in the door to what you're writing. This is, I came up with this list. This is based on research. People have done research on titles and abstracts to try to figure out, what seems to work the best. So these are the rules that I promote. The first is to use common words. Research shows that the more uncommon words you use, the less downloaded the paper is going to be. If you use words that people don't understand, then they're less likely to download your paper. This is referring to academic research papers here. Use short titles. The American Psychological Association, their research 2009 shows 12 words is ideal. That's kind of the gold standard. You want titles that are 12 words or less. I actually made that in my journal. You cannot have a title over 12 words. The system won't allow you to enter it. So long titles, the reasons they're hard to remember, and they're less downloaded. You want to create a curiosity gap in your title, and Kevin mentioned that as well, as something that people are going to get attracted to. However, you don't want to have too much information. That's what those really long titles have, is too much information. I read it, well, it's kind of close to what I'm interested in, but it's really not that, so I'm not going to go any further than reading the title. If it's too vague, that might not be enough to grab the person. Avoid using words with little or no meaning. This really is one of my pet peeves. A study of, everything is a study of. Your paper is not, that's nothing special. Exploring, many papers are exploring. Trying to understand, that's something, again. These are unnecessary, meaningless words that apply to virtually any research title or paper And so don't put them in your title. It's a waste of space. Do not use acronyms or abbreviations because not everybody knows them unless you spell them out in the title and in the abstract. Do not use the word case. Case study papers are the least downloaded. So I refuse to let anybody use the word case or case study in a title for my journal, because that's what the research tends to show. Avoid humor because it's often not understood and will also likely reduce your search engine optimization results. And use declarative titles. So what is a declarative title? Here we go. Okay, so there are basically three types of titles that you can write. One is a descriptive title, and I would say 95% of the papers that I see have descriptive titles. That's a title that describes the subject of the article, but does not reveal the conclusions. And so this is an example from my journal. I think this was probably the original title, Internet-Mediated Representations of Voluntourism. Okay, it describes what it is, what the title is. And maybe that's good enough. That's pretty clear, and people who are interested in the internet and voluntourism, will be attracted to that. Declarative title is a title that actually states the conclusion. And so an example here is Internet representations of voluntourism fail to effectively integrate tourism and volunteering. That's actually what the article is all about. And then the third one is an interrogative or a question. It introduces the subject by question. How does the internet mediate representations of voluntourism? Research has shown that declarative titles are the ones that get downloaded the most, because there the person really knows exactly what it is that this paper is about. And it's a topic that actually might grab people who weren't really interested in those topics. I wanted to share with you, there's SEO engines they're all over the place on the internet. They help you rewrite titles for search engine optimization. Now, these are not for academic titles. These are for titles that are going to show up on Google, and you see the title and you click on it. So they tend to actually turn your titles into a bit of a more clickbait type of a title. So I would be cautious about that, because that may or may not work for academic papers. It seems like an SEO engine like this for academic papers might be good. The other thing is nobody really knows how SEO works. SEO is a secret held by the search engine companies. And so everybody's guessing what the algorithm is that are being used. So this is the original title for this particular paper: Travel Discontinuities, Enforced Holidaying at Home and Alternative Leisure Travel Futures After COVID-19. That's a mouthful. When I plug this in, this is my favorite one to use, exactmetrics.com, by the way. It came out with an overall score of 36. It was way too long, had too many words, didn't have any had common words, but no uncommon words, no emotional words, and no power words. So I reworked the title. I came up with this: When you holiday at home, is it really a holiday? That's actually the main research question that they asked in the survey they conducted. And I plugged that in, and I was actually kind of surprised. It came up at 83 with a score of 83. It says you want something between 40 and 60 is good, but best is over 70. So the character count is good. The word count is still a little long, but it does have these other examples of these other, at least emotional and uncommon words. So that's something you can play around with. I'm not exactly sure how useful it is for academic papers, but I think it does bring you up in the search engine results. Finally, 2 more minutes here on the abstracts. I do have my own way of thinking how an abstract should work. Again, the goal is citation. And so for tourism geographies, we allow 300 words for the abstract. In many journals only allow 150. But my goal is somebody can read the abstract and they can cite the paper without reading the full paper. And how do you do that? You need to provide enough information so that the reader is confident that they know what you did and that it fits or supports what they are trying to argue. The way to do this is to not describe the paper. I cringe every time, and I would say 90% of abstracts do this. They say, this paper is about this. In this paper, we try to do this. In this paper shows, and the paper shows. So I don't allow people to do that. And if there is one or two, I will actually go in and change it to get rid of those. What the abstract should be is not a description of the paper, but a short version of the paper. It needs to clearly state the objectives, purpose, or problem, the theoretical context. The methodology, to me, is the least important. People really want to know the methodology, they can go into the paper and read the full thing. But the most important is the findings and the global significance. Why? What were your findings? Why is this significant? How does this advance the research in understanding knowledge in that field? So this is what I try to promote. And I've never had any author complain about this. They often say, that they think actually it's a pretty good approach. So let's see, I might leave this and let you look at it. This is an original abstract on the left and one that I revised on the right. For example, this second sentence here, this is one whole sentence. The study, examines country B and country C, college students' perception of country A by using the concept of destination country image. DCI, which is never defined in the abstract, investigates the structure of macro and micro DCIs, which isn't really defined, tests the influence of the original DCI and the prospective tourist intention, that is the linear relational model and triangle model, which is never defined. So, I mean, this is a mouthful, really hard to understand. Somebody's going to read that and they're going to just not care. So, basically, in the revised version, the examination of the I define DCI in the first sentence, and the examination of the DCI perception of country A, I don't even bother with the student part, explains the micro-macro structure and tests the influence of the original DCI and visitation. So anyway, I think it's a lot easier. The results, the implications of this is something that also drives me nuts in the abstracts. The implications and limitations are also discussed. Period. That's all most abstracts ever say on the results. It should be the implications of these results include, and then you talk about the implications. So again, okay, that's my last slide. Just for more on those things that I just talked about, you can go to these resources. So. And I just one other thing I just wanted to mention, abstracts and titles, often reviewers never look at them. And they might look at the title, but the abstract, they never look at the abstract. I mean, I ask them to, but they never do. And so it's up to you to really make a good abstract. Okay, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, Alan. That was really interesting. We're getting a few comments in the chat around the links. Alan, you had some really great links in your presentation, so we will be sharing those afterwards so people can take a look in more detail, peruse those in their own time. So yes, we will share those. In the meantime, does anyone have any burning questions? Let's have a look. So yes, so we've got one question. Can a title be worded as a question? Alan, I think you touched on this. So do you want to take that one up? Are you a fan of questions in titles?
I think questions work. I mean, especially if it's more like a, well, yeah, the question works. Like I said, the declarative titles, the ones that have, kind of give you some indication of what the results were, tend to be downloaded the most. Now, this is that research that I cited was based on altmetrics, and so it's based on internet downloads. It's not based on citations. I haven't seen any research saying what type of title gets cited the most. And so, yeah, I think it can, sure. no problem. I mean, that's one of the forms of those 3 forms of titles. And in my SEO website where I did the title analysis, that's what I came up with, was an interrogative question. So I don't have any problem with that. I don't know, do you have any opinions on that, Kevin?
No, I mean, I don't think there are many titles that are questions in urban geography, but I think as a general principle, it's fine. It's just making sure that the paper actually answers the question that it asks in the title.
Absolutely. Okay, so another question in the box. Following publication, what other things can an author do to promote their article? Kevin, would you like to start?
Yep, sure. This is something that's changed during my academic career in the sense of the channels that are available. So, I mean, let's leave aside the fact that the journal, the publishers will support you, they'll do various things. And then, as Alan and I have talked about, there are a range of ways people will stumble upon your work, depending on the quality of the title, abstract, etc., etc. I think individuals can do things like tweet about it, so using that platform, send out copies to people, distribute information about the paper being out, maybe present once the paper's out, maybe even still keep talking about it or referencing it. So I guess there's a range of ways I think that us as authors can promote work and get it cited. Yeah.
Excellent. Yes, and I would add to that as well. So we've, in our research into search engine optimization and the advice we give, the more places a paper is linked from, so whether that's social media, whether that's a blog, the better in terms of ranking. So really, yeah, there are ways of doing that. Probably the participants here will probably be aware they're doing some of those things in their ordinary life anyway. They're probably on Twitter or on an academic Facebook group or part of a listserv. So any links to published work really do help. Alan, do you have anything to add?
I know there's things that I do we do. I mean, I'm actually on my way out. I'm just barely hanging in there. I've turned most of my journal over to 2 other people who are now the primary editors in chief. But there's a number of things we do. We maintain our own web page. We have something, I don't know if you're familiar with the conversation. I mean, if you have an article that you can rewrite for the conversation and then link it back to your article, that's fantastic. We started our own version of that called Tourism Geographic, in which we're doing things like that. So I think there are a lot of ways. If you have your own web page, of course, that's a really good way to do it, to link back. But I don't know, I have a question for you, Sarah. Do you think academic SEO is similar to general SEO for articles that are more written for the general public?
Yeah, I think there are certainly similarities. We know that the way search engines trawl research, so we can kind of monitor how that's happening, and we know that putting keywords in the first X amount of characters, or making sure that you put the relevant keywords in an abstract and use synonyms as well, so that you're covering all the bases. We know that those sorts of things do impact how research is then found, so discovered. But like you say, it is a little bit of a black box in that you can identify some things that are working for particular papers or for a particular set of papers, but it's not at all a kind of formulaic, if you do X, Y, and Z, your paper will automatically be picked up. So yes, there are certain things that you can do to kind of maximize your chances, I would say, but then, you know, they're by no means, if you do all of those things, job done.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on to another question. Is it possible to get a rejection if the title is poorly written? Now, that's an interesting one because I've come across something like this before, but I can see the editors shaking their heads. So perhaps, Kevin, do you want to jump in first and then Alan?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it clearly is possible. Everything's possible. I don't think I've ever rejected a paper on the basis of the title alone. What I would say, there's a very strong correlation between the quality of the title, the abstract, and the paper itself. So, you know, I can almost tell when I read the title, the chances of it making it through to being reviewed, frankly. And then I would say then, so then let's take out a whole swathe of papers that are desk rejected. The papers that then go forward to be reviewed, again, I can probably at first glance know which papers, which titles are likely to stay unchanged and which are likely to evolve. As Alan said, reviewers don't really know the abstract. And actually, in my experience in urban geography, reviewers rarely comment on the titles, frankly, apart from every now and then you'll get someone. More often, it's the case that I will look at it and then the author themselves will often look at the comments of the reviewers and decide actually, you know, the title probably needs some sort of changing. But I don't think I've ever rejected a paper on the basis of a title as of yet. So.
No, I never have either. But, you know, our tourism geographies does have that limit. So you cannot put more than 12 words into Scholar One when you submit the paper. And so, so sometimes, I mean, there are issues with titles, but I've never rejected a paper on the title.
I should say I like your style, Alan. I think urban geography may be using. We may have to go back and the parameters a little bit on some of our number of words, because we do have titles that are very long. You know, they're almost eking towards, I would say, a short abstract.
Right. Yeah. So I get papers when the author suddenly discovers they can only use 12 words, and they put a shorter title in Scholar One, but the paper itself is like a whole sentence long.
Yeah.
You know, and I tell you got to make them the same. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess.
And one other thing about the bad abstract, I know, you know, there's a lot of authors who, for English is not their native language, and they do have a challenge trying to compose, you know, what is a nice abstract or nice title. And so I'm always happy to help people with that.
And I think most editors are willing to help where they see potential in paper. I think that shines through, and you know, you will get help and support if you ask for it, and if the paper shows promise. The point I was going to make on this, I have actually had this on a journal that I work on. I will name no names, but the journal gets a lot of submissions every year. So the editor-in-chief who's doing the initial screening had a process whereby he would desk reject papers for various different reasons. One of those reasons on one particular paper was there was a spelling error in the title. And his rationale was, if you're going to submit a paper with an error in the title, I'm not going to read the rest of the paper. So that's just, you know, just a point there to just check, double check, spell check, get somebody else to read your paper, all of those things, just so that doesn't happen to you.
And we've had that in urban geography, frankly, you know, or in the first line there's an error. And as I say, that won't be the sole reason for rejection, but the chances are, if those kind of issues are there, then there's probably bigger issues with the paper that probably means it's likely to get desk rejected.
Okay, so let's take another question from the box. Is a longer abstract better if it covers more implications and relevance of the paper? So where do we stand on what you should be putting in your abstract and how long that should be?
Well, I think so, but that's because, you know, I explained why I think, you know, you want a mini version of the paper so people might cite it without actually spending a lot of time with the full paper. But obviously, I think most journals would, I don't know if that's true, Sarah, most journals are actually 150 words, which is somewhat limited.
Right, and most journals as well, if you read their guidelines, so when you come to writing, if you read the guidelines before you start, that will give you an idea of what you've got to aim for. And journals do have different criteria. So as you say, some will be 150 words, some will want structured abstracts, some will want unstructured. So yes, another piece of advice there would be to check out, so identify the titles that you're writing for, and check out what it is specific they are asking you to do. Kevin?
You know, I was going to say, I mean, clearly, so there's a difference between an abstract, which is a sort of shorter version of bits of the paper, and a kind of almost, Alan was describing, an almost executive summary, which, as Alan says, you could actually cite without reading the whole thing. Yeah. So, and it's a bit like there's a question there about the average length of publishing. I mean, there is no average. I mean, an average in this sense is meaningless because each journal literally is very different. And so my recommendation would always be to look at the style guides when you're thinking about writing a paper or an abstract or a title of a particular journal.
Absolutely. So I'm aware we're up to time now, but there are just 2 questions left in the chat. So I hope it's okay for everybody if I just spend another couple of minutes. We'll just finish up on those questions. So most journals ask for 4 to 6 keywords. Any thoughts on the choice of those? Is it okay to repeat the same ones used in the title, or should they be different? Kevin, do you want to start with that one?
I have to say, I also struggle with keywords as an author. I always have done, and not all journals do this. I've written for a few economics journals where they're very on it when it comes to keywords. Not all geography journals, I think, do. I think it is good. I mean, it is good to have a bit of repetition across the abstract, the title and the keywords, just to reinforce the kind of central features. I mean, I guess it comes down to thinking about how you're trying to place your contribution in the broader field. And so you can do a bit of work on that. So in the case of urban geography, you know, you might choose one concept, one method, and one city, perhaps, because there's another number of ways into your paper. And so it might be a city that you're looking to align yourself with a body of work on a particular city, or a method, or a concept, or 2 or 3 kind of key concepts. And that tends to be how my journal tends to, the authors in my journal tend to think about keywords, at least.
Excellent.
I've kind of struggled with keywords in part because I don't really understand SEO that well. But I think after actually preparing for this and talking and listening to Sarah, to me, the keywords, from what I've heard, seen online, is somebody once asked, is it better to have more tags, which is keywords, or fewer for search engine optimization? And the answer was, it's better to have more and it's better to have fewer. It's best to have fewer. If somebody's searching for a certain set of words and you have exactly that set of words, then your paper will come up on top. But if somebody's doing a random search, you know, and you want to grab everybody who's doing that random search, then it's better to have more keywords. And so nobody really knows if it's better to have fewer keywords or more keywords. But in general, I think keywords, title, and the first 230 words of your abstract, that's where you're going to be found on the search engines. And so it's up to you what words you put in there.
Excellent. And I'm just going to deal with the final question very briefly, and then we will wrap this up. So if I can't avoid technical words in my title, is that okay? And if the main method is case study, can we keep it? I would say very briefly, the point of your title is to get readers interested. So you're identifying what your paper is going to do, what your paper is covering, but also you need to stand out slightly. So if there are a lot of papers that cover similar areas and are using similar titling methods, then your paper just won't stand out. So whilst we do see still a number of papers that are case study XYZ, it's helpful if you also incorporate something that really makes your paper different as well. So I hope all of that helps. Thank you so much to Alan and to Kevin for their expertise and sharing the work that they do on their journals and how they approach some of these things themselves. Thank you all as well for joining us and for making those the Q&A at the end so interesting. As we've said at the beginning, we will share relevant links. There are some in the chat, but we will also round up the useful ones and pop those out to you as well. That will all be shared. So the last thing for me to do is to let you know that the next webinar in this series is given by a colleague of mine at Taylor and Francis. That webinar is on the 1st of December at 2:30, and that's GMT, and is on publishing ethics, what not to do. So my colleague Sarah Robbie will be giving that presentation. So you can find more information on that and register for free on the RSA website. Okay, so on the RSA website, you'll also find the relevant links and more information on membership, member benefits, and I would highly recommend checking those out and signing up. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will circulate the links, as we've said, and take any follow-ups as well as part of that. But please do check out the RSA website before you go. Thank you very much.